Hi everyone, it's Dianna and this is part 2 of the Major Arcana cards of my new Witching Pen series tarot deck. So I'm going to show you the next 7 cards now. I've already done part 1, I showed you 8 cards in that video. So if you look back on my author YouTube channel, which is at Dianna Hardy, you will find the first cards that I showed you. Now I'm going to show you the next 7, and just to remind you, I'm not showing you these in chronological order. I'm showing you them in loose order of events that took place in the Witching Pen series. The idea behind me showing it to you this way is you can see a more clear link between the cards and the characters that they relate to, which I'm hoping will give you just a deeper understanding and a deeper meaning to the cards when you use them. Remember, there are major spoilers throughout this video, major spoilers that talk about pivotal points in the Witching Pen series, so please bear that in mind if you're going to watch this. This is Temperance. This card depicts the moment when Amy's life is split between 2 time periods and 2 very, very different energies. So here we've got the hot, arid fire of the desert and essentially Pueblo's life. And here we've got the cool ocean of the North Atlantic just off the coast of Scotland and some heather-covered fields. So this side representing Paul. And you've got the hourglass in the middle. And of course this card Temperance is all about having to wait. It's about time itself. The word temperance comes from the Latin temper, which literally refers to time itself. So this is a card all about patience, all about having to wait, about outside or external forces being such as they are that there's nothing you can do about your current situation. But it also indicates potential peace if you can find a way to accept events and if you can find a way to be patient and to wait for things to work out in their own time. As well as this hourglass here, I've put this atom in the middle of the hourglass. Now the atom is a symbol that you're going to see throughout this deck. It's not a specific symbol that was used in the Witching Pen series itself, but atom in itself is representative of the building blocks of all material life. It can also be aligned to the name Adam and the very beginning in terms of creation myths. So that is also another reason why I put that there. Atom very much relates to the story of man. You're going to see this little atom symbol throughout this deck, and when you see that, it suggests that there are events taking place that are potentially beyond your control, or while you may have some choices, you won't be able to access all the choices or to change all the things happening. Some things are out of our control and are up to the grander design of life. So that is essentially what the atom represents. It also represents new, the new beginning that is pending, that is taking shape behind the scenes. We can't see that new beginning yet, but it's the very beginning of manifestation. So while we're reading the Witching Pen series, we're aware of a potential new world waiting to wake up and waiting to rise. That is essentially what the atom represents. And here is the Magician. So you've got the 4 elements here, okay, of the 4 suits. So swords, hearts, which is cups, dragons, which is wands, and worlds, which is pentacles. The Magician is able to manipulate all the elements around him, but even he will be subject to the things that are out of his control and part of that grand design of life. So even though he does have control of all the things around him, there are aspects of energy, of magic, of life that he won't be able to control, that are out of his reach. This is a Shaker man's costume. The Shakers were a kind of I guess, religious society or a religious organization that existed, I think, around the 1700s, end of the 1700s, that kind of time. I haven't actually looked too much into the Shakers themselves, their history. I only searched briefly, but as soon as I saw this costume, I thought that's the kind of look that I'm looking for the magician. It's very mysterious, a little bit ethereal, esoteric, which is, what I wanted here, because his ability to do magic, to manipulate the things that are taking place around him is a big focus of this particular card. You've got a faceless magician here. Instead of a face, you've got this hourglass on his head, which of course symbolizes the infinity symbol, which you do see above the magician's head in traditional tarot cards. But also it relates back to this Temperance card here. It forms a link between the magician and time. And you've got this apple tree behind the magician, which symbolises another world, a gateway to fairy, the fairy realm. He has access to other dimensions somehow or another. The person who is being represented by this card, by this archetype, is Etienne, Eleanor's grandfather. Etienne in the present day. So this very, very old man who is an elder of the Witch Council, the leader of the Witch Council, who we don't really know an awful lot about. We only learn much more about him by the end of the Sands of Time. And of course, these two cards are indicative of that story, book 2, the Sands of Time. And then we've got the Emperor, another elusive person in this deck. In this deck, he's just a shadow figure, but we can already see that his clothing is different from that of the magician. However, there are similarities with this card, the big one being the apple tree in the background. So who is the Emperor? The Emperor is Paul, right? So while we've got Etienne representing the magician, we have Paul, which is his younger self that belonged to a completely different time in a completely different life, representing the Emperor. Paul was an accountant. He fell in love with his childhood sweetheart, Elizabeth, and they had a very happy marriage, and they moved up to Scotland to make a better and more peaceful, more quiet life for themselves. We have this apple tree here in the background, and of course the apple tree to Paul is very significant because this is where he finds Elizabeth after she seemingly killed herself. And his life changed forever from that point onwards. And we learn all of that by the end of the Sands of Time and in which ways his life changed. But of course, you can see here the connection clearly if you know the story and how one man became another. I put in the traditional ram here, the Aries symbol. There are some symbols in the tarot that are so ingrained it feels wrong not to put them in. So the ram had to go in here, even though there's no ram in the Witching Pen series specifically, but the Emperor is associated with that Aries symbol and that ram. And in this card, he's sort of looking at Paul, kind of daring him to take charge of his life. And to move forward in the way that he needs to move forward. We've got the dragon overhead symbolizing an echo of the new world, an echo of this man's destiny. We've also got a split in the ground here, which forks into two different directions, which you can see much more clearly when you've actually got the card in front of you. There's the crack, and it does actually fork into this direction and that direction. This is obviously significant of the earthquakes. After the dragon is born, the earth shakes, and there will be fissures and splits and so on. But it also represents this man's falling life, his life crumbling and falling apart. The Emperor trying to hold everything together, looking after those he loves, those he feels responsible for. Namely, that's going to be Elizabeth / Amy. But, you know, this would be anybody who he is close to and part of his family and part of his community, because that's what the Empress stands for. And in the very end, in The Last Dragon, it does turn out that he gives everything up for Eleanor and for Carl and for his child who's just been born and for Amy's future. And that is the strength of the Emperor, the ability to do that when push comes to shove. We've also got that atom here, and we've also got the 2 wedding bands. That's quite significant. This is another symbol that you're going to see throughout this deck, and obviously the 2 wedding bands are also significant in the Witching Pen series itself. This is very much about Paul and Elizabeth and their marriage. This is about commitment, choosing a path, loyalty to those that you love, and so on. This will be fully explained in the guidebook, these symbols to the Witching Pen tarot deck. And here we've got essentially the opposite to the coolness and logic and reason of the Emperor. We have the Shaman, which in traditional tarot is the Hierophant. And of course this is Pueblo. This is Pueblo. It couldn't be anybody else. He is the king of the Desek tribe. He is a shaman by birth, by inheritance, as it were. He's a shapeshifter, and you see his panther here. The Hierophant in traditional tarot always wears a kind of crown or a significant headgear. And when I made this card, I did feel there was something missing here at the top. I wanted to see that. So what I've done is I've put his necklace of bones that he inherited when he took the kingship of the Desek tribe upon himself, when he walked into that role finally, after it had been taken from him. He got given or earned his necklace of bones, so that's hanging above his head like a crown there. And of course you've got that atom there again, okay, right on his navel. And of course we can see now there's a connection, the atom with Paul, with Pueblo, with Etienne, who is Paul. You know, we're starting to see the connections between the cards here, which is what I'd like. And when I've done all 3 videos, I'm going to put out some videos with some card combinations of the Major Arcana, so you can see how the characters just play with each other in this deck, as well as the traditional meaning of the cards. You've literally got what the characters mean to each other, and that adds quite an interesting depth, I think, to this tarot deck. So this is a very interesting card. There's a lot happening here. This is the Lovers. And for me, the Lovers has always been about a greater love. So it's about choice and commitment, choosing your path. It's about demonstrating your total loyalty and commitment to the direction you choose to go in. So we've got Amy here, turning her head away from the sands of time, from this hourglass. The 2 wedding bands are whipping up in front of her in its own little vortex. You've got the Emperor here in the background. You've got the Shaman here in the background. The apple tree behind the Emperor. The acacia tree behind the Shaman, representing where the new world will essentially be born. And we've got a heart split in 2. And the same split in the ground that the Empress stood on, with the 2 paths here forking. This card, I think, speaks for itself when you look at all the images in it and all the symbolism in it. This is Amy and her choice and her confusion and the heartache of knowing she has to make this choice and not being able to make it, because the truth is that both paths mean the world to her and she loves them both, and she cannot make that choice easily, if at all, which is for me very much what the Lovers card is about. I always tend to read this card very traditionally, because there are other cards in the tarot deck that symbolize love in its more romantic form. The Ace of Cups, for example, the Two of Cups, definitely, even the Six of Cups for me, it can be very much a romantic card. So for me, it's like I don't need another romantic card in the Major Arcana. What I need is something that symbolizes something much greater than that. So love, yes, but more like a destiny-filled love. It's more about higher love and higher purpose, and the commitment you choose to make to that. So that's what this card is about. The last thing I want to say about it is this. We've got these cometing apples, these apples flying in from seemingly nowhere. And I wanted to put that there because there is a connection between Amy, a very small connection, and Lucifer. There are those apples again. In The Last Dragon, he hands her an apple because she so desperately needs to know what to do and what choice to make. And that interaction they have is pretty much the only conversation I think that we see them have in the entire series, but it's the breakthrough that Amy needs for her to finally come out of this state that she's been in, and we can see that as a card combination as well. If both of these came up together next to each other in a reading, we have those apples bringing those two together, and that conversation can essentially be a meaning of the reading. So moving on, we have the Empress, and this is representing Amy. This is a beautiful pregnant woman I found on Pixabay. This is a very comfortable Amy, actually, and I don't know if in some sense we ever see her this comfortable in the Witching Pen series, but the Empress here in this card is depicted as somebody who has settled into herself and settled into her role. She's wearing her blue sapphire necklace here, which is a gift from Pueblo. It belonged to his mother. This is her own shapeshifter cat, her own guise that she's never grown into, but is there nevertheless, because we know Amy is a shapeshifter, but she's never been taught properly how to do it, because she was taught by Etienne, and Etienne wasn't a shapeshifter. That wasn't his gift. What he taught her instead was magic and teleportation and so on. He taught her the ways of magic. We see a basket of apples, and this time they're not cometing out of the sky, but they're very abundant in a fruit basket in front of her, suggesting that she's finally found a semblance of peace and fertility and is accepting all the gifts and opportunities and doorways that are open to her. There's the telltale atom, and we've got the wedding bands down here as well. And just as in the Emperor card, we've got a dragon flying overhead. Let's find that Emperor card. There we go. The other direction. So there's the Emperor and the Empress. The dragon is the thing, and the wedding bands. The dragon and the wedding bands really are the two images that bring these two cards together. I do love this image. She looks so contented. It's just a really beautiful image. And there's a protectiveness here over her unborn baby, which is also a trait of the Empress, that protectiveness over those that she loves, that she'll do anything for. And here we have the wheel. I think this is the last card I'm going to show you today. Yeah, this is the wheel. And what goes up must come down. What goes down must come up. Eras begin and end. Things always change, and change is the only constant. That is a phrase you will find in the Witching Pen series. Change is the only constant. This is pretty self-explanatory, I think. You've got the apple tree here at the bottom. You've got fairies and angels falling. You've got dragons rising and humans risen. You've got man here on top of the world and the acacia tree here in the background. Okay, so eventually, in a few thousand years, that wheel's going to turn again. Okay, man will be at the bottom, angels and fairies will be heading up. it's a self-explanatory card. You've got the world here spinning with the atom, the building block of all life, creating a new reality as we speak. So those are the 7 cards I wanted to show you today. Do let me know what you think in the comments. The next video I'm going to do, part 3, is going to be the last video, and I think it's 7 more cards I'm looking forward to showing you in that video, and that will essentially complete all the Major Arcana. And then I'm really looking forward to showing you the rest of the deck. I'll basically be doing a video for each of the suits, I think, when the time comes. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 3.